Good afternoon. My name is Michelle Harrison, and I am a special education teacher at Shawnee Heights Middle School. I'm also the current president for the Shawnee Heights Education Association. So today we're having short question and answer sessions with candidates for our Board of Education. Would you like to introduce yourself and the position that you're running for?
Yes, my name is Sarah Sanders. I am actually running as a write-in candidate for District C, Position 6.
All right, thank you very much for joining us today. Our first question is multi-part. What is your primary goal as an individual member of the board? And then what is your vision for the future of the district? And then how would you know if those goals or visions are being achieved?
Okay. So for me, my primary goal is looking at some long-term planning. Our district needs to have some strategic goals to look for growth and development in our district over the course of the next several years. And I think it's important that as we work through that planning, that we also take the time to document what our goals are. So if we are looking at growth within the district, by what percent do we think that the growth will occur, and what will we need to do to accommodate that growth? And make sure that we also have milestones set, as well as deadlines for achieving portions of our goal.
All right. So with that, then how would you actually know if those goals are being achieved?
So I think that would be kind of an inherent part of the goal setting, that if we need to plan for growth of 20% over the next 5 years, what does that take? We need to, do we need to look at additional funding for building onto buildings? Do we need to have a plan for possibly having a new building added to our district? And, what will those things take? How do we ensure that we're in a position to actually move forward with the goals that we set, but identifying what they are and then setting the pavement to move forward.
Okay, thank you. Now, how do you plan to build and maintain relationships and connection with students, staff, and constituents?
Well, I am a naturally collaborative person. I love getting out, talking to people, hearing other perspectives, and having some time to kind of contemplate, what their points of view are and where they're coming from. I think it's important to hear different perspectives, because a lot of times that can give you the opportunity to see things from the other side that maybe you wouldn't have inherently thought of yourself. So I think leveraging opportunities within the various councils, the site council, the district advisory council and the superintendent's council, hearing the voices that are in those situations. But I also think looking at other needs within our district. I know we had the anti-bullying group that was working together. So looking at what the needs in our district are and reaching out to find students, staff, community members that have interests in those or concerns with those things, and then taking the time to listen to what they have to say, but then also taking that information back and processing it to be active with that information.
Okay. So in your experiences, what is the best way to address differences of opinion on a board, or differences between the board and, say, district administration or staff? And then could you support decisions that you were not in favor of? Why or why not?
Okay. So in my experience, the best thing to do to address differences of opinion is to look for the common ground. Everybody that's on this board should be here because we want to support our staff. We want to set the students up for success. I think we can all agree that that's why we're here. We want to have a great district. And so building from that, and then looking at what our ultimate goals are and working backwards. So if we know that we're seeking to attain a certain goal, focusing on the goal, not the steps in between. And then as we work backwards from what we're trying to achieve and say, okay, so how does this step meet the goal? We don't need to have our pride involved in whose idea it was or what method we're using, but really focusing on what's the ultimate goal. We're all in this together. We're a team. And while we may not always agree on how we get to the end of the process, recognizing that this is the ultimate goal that we're supposed to be supporting.
Okay. So in that light, could you then support decisions that you were not necessarily in favor of?
Yes. I mean, I've worked at a company for 20 years. I've been in a management role, and I have executed several things that I wasn't a huge fan of, but I recognized that it was the company's goal or it was for the greater good. I think there's just a level of emotional intelligence that goes along with being able to recognize that sometimes we have a job to do and it may not be our personal favorite thing, but we need to recognize the greater good and move forward to achieve the goal.
Okay, thank you. So what are your thoughts then on our current and proposed budgets for the district? If future cuts happen to be necessary, where do you think you would make the first cuts? And are there areas you would not consider cutting?
So this is probably the most difficult question and incredibly complex. I know that our current board and administration has taken a great deal of pride in really working to make sure that we're spending our dollars wisely, and just considering the changes that we've made over the last year with the staffing changes, adding staff to support our building staff and things of that nature, I think it's really difficult to see any component of that group that isn't critical to our students. So as far as where I would plan to make cuts, I'll be honest, I think that it would be a really difficult decision. I think looking back at some of the methods that were used previously when we had really deep cuts to our budget would be my starting point to see where did we look at before. I know we haven't entirely recovered from that either, though, so I don't think that our opportunity to make cuts at this point would be the same as they were, prior to the funding cuts that we had. So I will admit that will be a really difficult discussion if that time comes, but I think it's also really important to say that that would be an area as a board member that I feel like we would be responsible for understanding what's happening and why, and making sure we're sharing that information with our constituents so that we can try to work as a unified voice to speak to the representatives that are making those decisions, to ask them why they think that those cuts are necessary and how we can work together to ensure that adequate funding is received.
Okay. So in that same vein then, how would you approach advocating for education funding at the state level?
Kind of back to my collaborative nature, making connections with our county delegation to engage them in conversations. What are their perspectives on our district? What can we share with them to help them understand the needs? How do we support all of our students? And they have a huge role in that. So I think us having those conversations at the board level, and then again engaging our district so that we can speak as a unified voice, because I can't make that happen. You can't make that happen. We need to work together to that end.
All right, thank you. So your final question today comes to you from one of our government classes at the high school. Your randomly generated question is question number 1. What are you planning to do differently than what you've heard other candidates talk about?
I think it's really important to recognize that some of the issues facing our district right now are temporary, and that we have, a lot of critical issues facing us, including class sizes, looking at the growth in our district, looking at staff retention and benefits, and really taking the time to focus on those issues and how we as a board can work to support initiatives that are going to improve those circumstances for our district, for our staff, for our students. So I just think it's really important to take the time to start looking forward and focusing on just the long-term health of our district.
Thank you very much for coming in today and for sharing your thoughts on the district. Thank you, too, for your interest in serving our community as a member of the board.
Thank you.